Imagine a world where your only companion is the crashing waves and the distant gleam of your lighthouse. What if a storm, meant to isolate, instead delivered the one person who could shatter your solitude and ignite a love as dangerous as the ocean itself? Could a forbidden romance survive the fiercest tempest, both outside and within? Hit the subscribe button to show your unwavering support for my channel, dear viewer. Thank you for subscribing. Some say the sea keeps secrets. But what if it also delivers them? This is the story of Thomas Greymore, a lighthouse keeper who chose exile over explanation, and Rhys Callahan, the shipwrecked sailor who would become his only hope. The lighthouse stood like a forgotten sentinel on the edge of the world, where jagged cliffs met furious waters. For 7 years, Thomas had kept its light burning, not to guide others home, but to ensure he never had to find his own way back to a place that didn't want him. He was 29, though the isolation had carved lines around his eyes that suggested older. His hands were calloused from rope and stone, his shoulders broad from hauling oil and maintaining the lens that turned through endless nights. He spoke to no one. The supply boat came once a month, left provisions, took his requisition list, and departed without conversation. That was how Thomas preferred it. The storm arrived on an October evening, violent and sudden. Thomas had seen the warning signs in the sky, the sickly green horizon, the way the gulls fled inland hours before. He'd secured everything, checked the lamp oil twice, and settled in to wait. The wind howled like a living thing. Rain hammered the windows in sheets so thick the world became water. Thomas climbed the spiral stairs to the lamp room, watching the chaos below. The beam cut through the darkness, faithful and futile, because no ship should be out in this. But one was. He saw it through a gap in the storm, a merchant vessel being torn apart by waves the size of buildings. The masts snapped like kindling. The hull groaned. Thomas's heart clenched despite himself. He'd left humanity behind, but he couldn't watch men die. The ship went down within the hour. Thomas descended the stairs, pulled on his oilskin coat, and took a lantern to the rocky beach below the lighthouse. The tide was treacherous, the stones slick with foam. He expected to find bodies. He found one man, alive. Rhys Callahan was tangled in rope and debris, unconscious but breathing. Blood mixed with seawater on his temple. He was younger than Thomas, perhaps 24 or 25, with dark hair plastered to his skull and a face that even unconscious held something defiant. Thomas dragged him from the water's grasp, hauled him over his shoulders, and carried him up the cliff path to the lighthouse. The keeper's quarters were small, a bed, a table, a stove, shelves of books read and reread until their spines cracked. Thomas laid the stranger on his own bed, stripped away the wet clothes, and worked by lamplight to assess the damage. A head wound, bruised ribs, exhaustion and cold, but nothing broken that he could find. He wrapped Rhys in blankets, stoked the fire until the room grew warm, and waited. For 2 days, Rhys drifted in and out of fever dreams. Thomas tended him with careful efficiency, the same way he maintained the lighthouse machinery. Water, broth when he could take it, cool cloths for the fever. He told himself this was duty, nothing more. A keeper saves those the sea tries to claim. But on the 3rd morning, Rhys opened his eyes. They were storm gray, those eyes, and they fixed on Thomas with an intensity that made the keeper step back. "Where am I?" Rhys's voice was rough, salt-damaged. "Greymore Light. You were shipwrecked. The others. Gone." Rhys closed his eyes. "I know. I saw them go under." Thomas poured water into a cup, held it while Rhys drank. Their fingers brushed. Thomas pulled away too quickly. "You'll need rest. A few more days, then the supply boat comes. They'll take you back to the mainland." "And you?" "I stay here. I'm the keeper." Rhys studied him with those unsettling gray eyes. "You live here alone?" By choice? The lighthouse needs tending. That's not an answer. Thomas turned away, busied himself with the fire. Rest. You've been through an ordeal. But Rhys didn't rest, not in the way Thomas meant. He healed quickly, too quickly for the keeper's comfort. Within a week, he was moving around the quarters, insisting on helping despite Thomas's protests. He learned the rhythms of lighthouse life, the winding of the clockwork mechanism, the trimming of wicks, the constant battle against salt corrosion. They worked in silence at first. Thomas didn't know how to make conversation anymore, and Rhys seemed content to simply exist in the space between words. But silence has a way of becoming comfortable, and comfort leads to cracks in armor. It started with small things. Rhys noticed Thomas read the same 3 novels over and over, and one evening asked which was his favorite. Thomas found himself explaining the plot of a maritime adventure, the words tumbling out after years of disuse. Rhys listened like it mattered. Another night, Thomas found Rhys standing in the lamp room, transfixed by the rotating lens. "It's beautiful," Rhys said. "All this light, pushing back the dark. It's just a job." "No." Rhys turned to him. "It's more than that. You keep this burning so others don't end up like me. So they find their way home. I'm not a hero. I didn't say you were. But you're not nothing, either." Thomas felt something shift in his chest, a tectonic movement of things long buried. He fled to the kitchen, suddenly unable to breathe in that small space with this man who saw too much. The nights grew longer as autumn deepened. The supply boat came and went. Thomas told them the survivor would leave with the next delivery. Rhys said nothing, but Thomas caught him staring at the horizon with an expression the keeper couldn't read. They fell into routines that felt dangerously domestic. Rhys cooked while Thomas maintained the light. They ate together at the small table. Rhys talked about his life before, a merchant sailor from a coastal town, the second son of a fisherman, a wanderer who'd never found a place to settle. Thomas listened and said little about his own past, but Rhys didn't push. One evening, during a meal of fish stew and hard bread, Rhys asked, "Why did you really come here, Thomas?" The keeper's hand tightened on his spoon. "I told you. The lighthouse needed a keeper. There are 100 lighthouses. Why this one? Why alone?" Thomas stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "That's not your concern." "Maybe not." Rhys's voice was gentle. "But I think you've been alone with it too long." That night, Thomas couldn't sleep. He climbed to the lamp room and stood in the rotating beam, feeling it sweep over him again and again. Below, the sea crashed against the rocks in eternal conversation with itself. He'd chosen this isolation, believing it was safer than the alternative. Safer than wanting things he couldn't have. Safer than being seen. But Rhys saw him anyway. The confession came during a storm, smaller than the one that brought them together but fierce enough to rattle the windows. They were in the kitchen, playing cards by lamplight, when Rhys laid down his hand and said, "I had someone once. Back home. Another sailor." Thomas's heart stopped. What happened? His family found out. There was talk. Threats. He married a girl from the next town over, and I left on the first ship that would take me. Rhys met his eyes. "I've been running ever since. Maybe that's why the sea took my ship. I wasn't running toward anything, just away." The words hung between them like a bridge. Thomas could cross it or burn it. He thought of his own past, the whispers in his village, the minister's son who'd held his hand behind the church, the choice between denial and departure. He'd chosen to disappear. "I understand," Thomas said quietly. "More than you know. I thought you might." Rhys reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of Thomas's. "You don't have to tell me. But I want you to know that whatever sent you here, whoever made you feel you had to hide, they were wrong about you. Thomas looked at that outstretched hand, weathered and scarred like his own. He thought about 7 years of silence, of pushing down every feeling until he was hollow. And then he thought about the past month, how Rhys's presence had filled the lighthouse with something he'd forgotten, hope. He took Rhys's hand. The touch was electric. Rhys's fingers curled around his, warm and certain. Thomas felt tears prick his eyes and didn't understand why until he realized, this was the first kind touch he'd received in 7 years. The first human contact that didn't flinch away. I was engaged, Thomas heard himself say. To a woman my parents chose. Good family, proper match. But I couldn't go through with it. The night before the wedding, I told her the truth. Told her I could never love her the way she deserved, because I wasn't. I couldn't. He swallowed hard. She was kind about it. Kinder than I deserved. But her family wasn't. Neither was mine. The whole village turned against me. Called me unnatural. Sick. Dangerous. Thomas. So I ran. Found this posting. Figured if I was going to be alone anyway, might as well make it official. He laughed bitterly. Safer for everyone, they said. Better to keep my sickness away from decent people. Rhys's grip tightened. You're not sick. You're not wrong. They are. How can you be so sure? Because I see you, Thomas Greymore. I see how you tend this light like it's sacred. I see how you pulled me from the sea and nursed me back to health, asking nothing in return. I see how you go quiet when you're thinking, how you smile at the sunrise even though you pretend you don't. And what I see is someone good. Someone worthy of love, not exile. Thomas pulled his hand away, stood up, paced to the window. Rain streaked the glass. You don't know what you're saying. You're grateful, that's all. Once you leave here, you'll realize. I don't want to leave. The words stopped Thomas cold. He turned. Rhys had stood too, was crossing the small room until they were barely a foot apart. I don't want to leave, Rhys repeated. I know I should. I know the supply boat is coming in 2 weeks, and I should be on it, and we should both go back to our separate loneliness. But, Thomas, I haven't felt this alive since before I can remember. Here, with you, in this impossible place at the edge of the world, I finally feel like I'm home. This isn't a home. It's a prison I built for myself. Then let me help you tear down the walls. Thomas's breath came ragged. Every instinct screamed at him to retreat, to protect himself, to push this away before it could hurt him. But Rhys was looking at him like he was something precious, something worth the risk, and Thomas was so tired of being afraid. If we do this, he whispered, if we try this, it can't be temporary. I can't. I can't let you in just to watch you leave. I'm not going anywhere. The world won't accept us. You know that. The world doesn't have to. We're already at the edge of it. Rhys raised his hand slowly, giving Thomas time to pull away. When he didn't, Rhys cupped his face gently. I'm not asking for easy, Thomas. I'm just asking for real. Thomas closed his eyes, leaned into that touch like a drowning man finding shore. I'm terrified. So am I. They stood like that for a long moment, foreheads touching, breathing each other's air. And then Thomas closed the last distance between them and kissed Rhys like he was oxygen and Thomas had been underwater for 7 years. The kiss was tentative at first, relearning something Thomas thought he'd buried. But Rhys responded with gentle certainty, his hands sliding into Thomas's hair, pulling him closer. They broke apart only to come together again, and again, until Thomas was laughing against Rhys's mouth, giddy with the impossibility of it all. Stay, Thomas breathed between kisses. Stay with me. Help me keep the light. Yes. Yes, I'll stay. They made love that night while the storm raged outside, two damaged souls finding shelter in each other. Thomas traced the scars on Rhys's body from years at sea, and Rhys kissed the tension from Thomas's shoulders with infinite patience. They were tender and desperate by turns, making up for years of loneliness in a single night. Afterward, tangled in blankets, Rhys asked, "Do you think it's always like this? This feeling?" "I don't know. I've never." Thomas trailed off. "Neither have I. Not really. Not where it mattered." Rhys pressed a kiss to Thomas's temple. "Whatever this is, I want more of it. Even knowing what it means. What people will say if they find out. Let them say it to the waves. We're beyond their reach here." But they weren't, not really. The supply boat came 2 weeks later, and Thomas faced a choice. He could report Rhys as departed, let him vanish into the bureaucratic cracks. Or he could request permission for an assistant keeper, knowing it would raise questions. Rhys made the decision for him. He walked down to meet the supply boat himself, spoke to the captain directly. He wanted to stay. He'd sign on as assistant keeper, no pay needed, just room and board. He was a sailor, knew his way around machinery and hard work. The lighthouse could use 2 sets of hands. The captain was skeptical but shrugged. If the keeper wanted help, and the man was willing to work for free, that was their business. He'd file the paperwork. It would take a month to process, but Rhys could stay provisionally. That night, Thomas held Rhys and said, "You didn't have to do that. You could have just stayed quietly." "I'm done hiding," Rhys said fiercely. "I won't lie about being here. I won't pretend you're just some keeper I work for. If anyone asks, I'll tell them I'm staying because I choose to. Because this is where I want to be. And if they figure out why, really why, then they figure it out. I'm not ashamed of loving you, Thomas. I won't start now." The word love hung in the air like a prayer. Thomas turned it over in his mind, tested its weight. "Love," he repeated softly. "Yes." Rhys met his eyes without flinching. "I love you. I think I started falling the moment I woke up and saw you standing there like some grim angel. And every day since has just made it more certain." Thomas felt the walls he'd built around his heart finally, fully crumble. "I love you too. God help me, I do." They built a life together in that lighthouse. Rhys proved invaluable, his sailor's knowledge complementing Thomas's meticulous care. They established routines, divided duties, worked as a seamless unit. To anyone watching from the mainland, they were just 2 keepers maintaining a light. But in the privacy of their shared space, they were so much more. They created a home in that stone tower. Rhys painted the kitchen walls a warm yellow, bringing color to Thomas's gray world. Thomas taught Rhys to read the weather in the clouds, and Rhys taught Thomas to cook something other than stew. They read aloud to each other on storm nights, debated philosophy over breakfast, made love in the lamp room with the beams sweeping over them like a benediction. It wasn't perfect. Thomas still had days where fear crept in, where he waited for the other shoe to drop. Rhys had nightmares about the shipwreck, waking gasping and reaching for Thomas in the dark. They fought occasionally, about small things made large by proximity, but they always found their way back to each other. The paperwork for Rhys's position came through. He was officially listed as assistant keeper. Thomas framed the document and hung it in the kitchen, his own small rebellion, proof that Rhys belonged here, that this was real. Word spread slowly on the mainland. 2 men, living alone together at Greymore Light. There were whispers, speculation, the kind of talk that Thomas had fled years ago. But distance provided a buffer. As long as they kept the light burning, as long as ships didn't wreck on their watch, the Lighthouse Authority left them alone. One day, nearly a year after Rhys had washed ashore, Thomas stood in the lamp room and realized he was happy. Not content, not simply surviving, but genuinely, impossibly happy. The isolation he'd chosen as punishment had become sanctuary. The prison had become paradise, all because of the man humming in the kitchen below. Rhys climbed the stairs, 2 cups of tea in hand. He passed one to Thomas and settled against his side, both of them watching the endless sea. "Do you ever regret it?" Thomas asked. "Staying here? Giving up the chance for a normal life?" Rhys considered this seriously. "I don't think we were ever meant for normal, Thomas. We're too broken for that, or too whole, depending on how you look at it. But this?" He gestured to the lighthouse, the sea, the space between them. "This feels right. Like all those years of wandering were just leading me here, to this moment, with you. The storm brought you to me. And you pulled me from the water. Gave me breath when I was drowning." Rhys set down his tea, turned to face Thomas fully. "You were my only hope, you know. When I was going under, I thought I was finished. But then there was light, cutting through the chaos. Your light. And I knew if I could just reach it, I might survive." Thomas pulled him close, buried his face in Rhys's hair. "We saved each other. We did. And we'll keep saving each other, every day, for as long as we have." They stood there as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. The light began to turn, faithful as ever, pushing back the darkness. Below, the sea that had tried to take Rhys sang its eternal song against the rocks. And in that lighthouse at the edge of the world, 2 men who'd been told they were wrong, broken, unnatural, loved each other fiercely and without apology, proving that the strongest light isn't the one that guides ships home, but the one that illuminates another person's soul and says, "You are seen, you are worthy, you are enough." Sometimes the fiercest storms don't destroy us, they deliver us to exactly where we were always meant to be. And sometimes the love we're told is forbidden is actually the only thing that can set us free. This is a story about finding home not in a place, but in another person brave enough to weather any tempest beside you.
Hit the subscribe button for more enchanting tales every week. Don't forget to keep the magic alive.